Hello and welcome to my fourth match from the Dominion League against Skizelo. This is the feature game for two reasons. The first is that the Band of Nomads, a rarely seen, rarely considered ally, plays a crucial part in both of our decks. The second reason is that we explore or revisit some key endgame ideas that will help you to win more games of Dominion. Let's have a look at the kingdom now. We have plus actions from Village Green. We have plus cards from Faithful Hound, Gear, and from Paddock. We have plus buy from Buried Treasure and Capital. We don't have gain. And we also have no trashing. No trashing is a problem, but looking at the cards in the kingdom, it seems like we can build a deck that will play some number of Buried Treasure and Capitals on our turn. There are two ways to build that deck that came to my mind upon initial inspection. The first one is your classical approach, Village Green and Gear to draw as many cards as possible and put down your treasures. The other, less conventional deck involves using Paddock for draw. Paddock has a couple key differences with the Village Green Gear deck. The first difference is that Paddock gains horses. Horses cost 3, and that will trigger the Band of Nomads ally. It means you can get a bonus every time you play a Paddock, either an action, a card, or a buy. Secondly, Paddock gives money. Paddock has 2 coin on it. That is an important part of your payload for your deck. The third thing is that Paddock gets stronger once piles are empty. For example, if the Paddock pile is entirely empty, you get a plus action from the Paddock. In that case, you can use your favor to perhaps draw a card. Effectively, Paddock reads +1 card, +1 action, +2 coin, gain 2 horses. That is, if it existed, an extremely powerful card for just 5 coin. Naturally, you have to combine the Paddock with the source of favors, which is the underling here. However, I think that is the preferred option because of the extra payload and the potential for many buys from the Band of Nomads. Let's see how we go about building this deck. We start off this game on turn 1 with 3 coin, and this is going to be a classic double gear opening. My opponent also follows me on the double gear opening. Double gear is a great opening for most kinds of decks you want to build here. I'm hoping to get to 5 with the double gear opening for my first Paddock. I see one of my gears straight away, and unsurprisingly, I hit 5. I will buy a Paddock. It looks like I have 3 terminals in the deck, but I have 1 favor. Everyone starts with the 1 favor. The first Paddock doesn't have to be terminal. Gear for my opponent. They don't get the 5 on turn 3. Probably will get it on turn 4. And they buy an underling. The underling is going to be an important part of the Paddock deck. I set aside my Paddock and an estate by my first underling as well. From my opponent's buys, it seems like they are pursuing the same type of deck as me. And it is confirmed here with their first Paddock. I get to play this Paddock. I don't have any other terminals in hand, so I do not have to use my given favor. I go ahead and I buy a second Paddock. It's not as bad as you think, because I have favors coming in from this singular underling and from the one that I started with. Think of the Paddocks as being non-terminal as long as I have favors. 5 for my opponent here. They also get a second Paddock. So far, everything seems just about identical. Gear draws into a horse and a Paddock. No problem. We'll play that next turn. We'll get an underling on 3. We need a few underlings in the deck to collect favors. Here's a Paddock for my opponent. They gain an action after playing the first Paddock so that they can play their second Paddock. They have 8 and just the one buy, so they choose a buried treasure to guarantee buy on their next turn. Here I have terminal collision, but it's saved by the band of nomads. I regain an action after gaining a horse to play my gear to set aside yet another pair of horse and paddock. I have 6. I am thinking about the buried treasure. I do not like this card, but the on-demand buy is useful enough for me to buy it right away. I don't have enough favors to go around to get both action and buy from the 2 horses gained from the paddock. So for now, I'll have to dedicate that task to the buried treasure. I really want to use my favors for actions of the paddock plays for now. Another buried treasure for my opponent and a second underling for them. This looks to be a big turn, so I'm happy I have the buy now. I take an action, exchange a favor for an action so that I can play my second paddock. We get up to 11 and 2 buys. I will buy a second buried treasure. I miss my gear here, unfortunately, but that's fine. And I go ahead and I demand an underling. So far, I have 2 underlings and 2 paddocks, so the action balance is good. I would like to get more paddocks, therefore I need more underlings, so I demanded an underling on top of the deck. Out comes my opponent's underling, followed by a couple of horses. They have the buried treasure in play here. We'll see if they are able to have a double 5 turn like me. They exchange a favor for an action so that they can play their gear after their paddock. They don't quite get to 10, they actually get quite far from 10. And they pick up a couple of underlings here instead of another paddock. I disagree with that. I think it should have been paddock. I find just one of my paddocks. Gain the horse, Band of Nomads allows me to change a favor into an action. We've seen this a few times now. And the gear is going to find me enough money for 10 and 2 buys. This is going to be, in a heartbeat, a couple of paddocks. I would prefer if I win that split, for obvious reasons. That'll be $4 extra I have that my opponent doesn't have, for instance. And more draw. On the other hand, my opponent has more underlings than I do. I'm a little bit concerned about that, but not so much. Soon the paddock pile will be empty, so I don't have to worry about terminal paddocks in the deck. 8 and a couple buys for my opponent. They go for the obvious underling and paddock, and those piles are getting thin. We are approaching the part of the game where paddocks will be non-terminal by default. Regain an action from the favor after gaining the horses because I have the gear in hand. I stop here. I don't play that horse because I have 5. I don't have any buys. I just have 5 because my buried treasures are messed up. And I cannot make use of any extra money, so I just put aside the horse and the paddock and buy my paddock, put 2 buried treasures in play, and I'm expecting to have a big turn next turn with the money from the buried treasure. My opponent draws a card with one of their favors and then gains an action with the other one of their favors. So in theory, if you have infinitely many favors, the first horse can draw a card from you from the paddock, and the second horse can give you back the action. +1 card, +1 action, +2 coin, +2 horses. Great. It's a great card in combination with the underling and the Band of Nomads. 10 and 2 buys for my opponent. I entirely expected them here to take the last 2 paddocks. That'll level the split at 5-5. However, they didn't do that. They bought 1 and then they demanded an underling on top of their deck. I think the reason why they didn't take the 2 paddocks is because they didn't want me to have the first use of the new improved paddocks that give plus action by default. I don't think that is the right decision because I am taking that 6th paddock, I'm winning that split, and I'm going to be happy about it. I play the paddock before the shuffle here so that there are more horses in. I can draw deeper into the deck. I have enough favors here to play most of my paddocks non-terminally, and I end up with a heap of money and 3 buys. As I mentioned just now, I am definitely going to buy a paddock. I'm not sure what I will get with the rest of the money and buys. I'm not sure if I want to get the other underling just because of piles, honestly. If the paddocks and the underlings empty, there are just 6 gears left and my opponent could tie. And I don't want my opponent to tie. I feel like with the 6th paddock, I have the better deck. I should make use of it. So here, I used the Band of Nomads in the buy phase for the first time this game to get an extra buy. I bought the paddock, received an extra buy so I can get a couple more 5 costs, one of which will be a buried treasure. Because I don't have any buried treasures in play right now and I want the plus buy, I get a second buried treasure to get more plus buy for next turn. And on 5, I will demand. I was thinking about what to get here off the demand. You get the horse by default, but should it be an underling? No, I'm still concerned about the pile out. And if I'm concerned about the pile out, then I shouldn't get the gear either. There are only 4 buried treasures left as well, and my opponent has the advantage in the favors department, so they can exchange some favors for buys and maybe capitalize on low piles. So I stay away from the underling, I stay away from the gear. I could believe you if you tell me that's too conservative, and I pick up a vagrant and just be quiet with that. The village green was the other option in my mind, but it doesn't do anything. I don't really need the plus actions because the paddocks are all non-terminal, and maybe my opponent will get the last underling, in which case the paddock gives 2 actions. My opponent sees almost all of their deck at this point. They are using their favors to draw cards now, and they gain some buys. They interchange between those options. They don't need to gain the actions anymore. I also don't need to gain the actions anymore. This is a clever play from them. They populate their discard pile with horses, then use the gear, trigger the shuffle. Those 7 cards you see there are 7 horses. They're going to be consistent for the rest of the game. 18 and 6 buys. So I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't conservative. Had I bought the underling, they could have tied by emptying the gears. And I believe I have the better deck. I believe I could win. On the other hand, now I know their max capacity. All 7 coppers are in play, and their buried treasures are split across 2 turns. 18 is their max. Let's see if they improve their ceiling or not. They go for province, that doesn't improve their ceiling. They go for 2 provinces, that also doesn't improve their ceiling. And a vagrant, which is neither here nor there. So I know my opponent has 18 and up to 6 buys. They could have more buys too, which may be enough to pile out on estates as well. Those are endgame considerations, and we are well and truly into the endgame now. We will stop building at this point. Almost stop building at this point. You'll see what I mean. So now it's over to me. I am down 2 provinces. Let's see how much cards we can draw first. This doesn't look promising right now, but I get the action. I don't use it for an extra card here because I feel like my deck is good enough. I feel like there's enough horses to get almost all the way through. Critically, I'm looking for at least 1 of my 2 buried treasures. That is very important for me to find. I have less favors, and I would prefer to use those favors for cards instead of buy. If I don't find the buried treasures, I have to use them for buy, and it cuts my draw. I desperately try to look for the buried treasures using my last 2 favors. Not my last 2, but the last 2 favors for cards. Draws me copper and estate. I have no buys from buried treasure going into the next turn, and I don't have that many favors, and I'm clearly still not drawing the deck. So what do we do here? We have 21 and 3 buys. I do get 2 provinces to match my opponent. I know they cannot buy 4 provinces. They only have the 18 coin, so this is completely safe. What do you do on the 5? Increase your ceiling. So I buy a capital. That is 6 more coin in 1 card. And I don't even know what my full ceiling is. It's at least 21, and with that capital it'll go up to 27. I am threatening now triple province. My opponent has to keep that in mind. Here are the buried treasures on 3 horses. I could have found that with a better draw. It didn't work out. We move on. My opponent is expected to see their entire deck here after they cleverly top-decked 7 horses. And they use favors for cards as necessary. They do the same trick here where they populate their discard with horses before triggering the reshuffle with the gear to top deck as many horses as possible. They probably store some in the gear as well. However, recall, this is their ceiling. This is their max capacity, max output. 18. They don't get the 6 buys this time. They only get up to 4. They do not touch the provinces because they understand that I am threatening triple province. If they take 2 provinces, I can take 2 provinces back on a duchy or an estate. And when I just demonstrated, I could take 2 provinces on duchy. So they're not touching the provinces. Makes sense. This is the endgame consideration that I alluded to at the beginning of the video. What do they do instead? They increase their ceiling as well. They buy 2 capitals and they have 8. Let's see what else they do. They go for a duchy. I don't like the duchy and I don't like the estate. I do like the 2 capitals, increasing their ceiling. Their deck is more consistent than mine because of their ability to top deck so many horses. Perhaps even a 3rd capital there is better. So with the 2 capitals, their ceiling has gone from 18 up to 24 up to 30 coin. With a 3rd capital, they were threatening quadruple province to end the game on their next turn. And that is a very difficult thing for me to play around, especially with no buried treasure in play. Play the paddock before the shuffle to populate your deck with more horses, and we go through and let's see how far we can get. Horses come out, more horses, finding more underlings and more paddocks. Have to have a pause here. We take the action to not draw cards dead after we play the gear, of course, so I can continue playing horses, for example. We are done here for now. However, we found 4 buried treasures, that's all of them, and we found our 1 capital. Do you want to play on? Well, you have to count your money, you have to look at the game situation. And here I think that I do not need to play on. I have enough in hand here. I get a buy from that final or penultimate horse. I have up to 20 and 3 buys. What is the end game play here for me? I buy a couple of duchies to just go ahead of my opponent. And on 10, I don't think I buy anything because I will have debt to repay from the capital. What is the idea here? I am not touching the provinces pile because I know my opponent is now threatening triple province. Well, if I buy 1 province, it makes it very easy for them to win the game. Even if I buy 2 provinces, which was my max capacity, very easy for them to win the game. I know they have 7 horses on top of their deck. 5 in hand, 2 on the deck right now. So I am putting myself in a position where I think I cannot lose. It's difficult to track because the amount of buys my opponent has is not easy to count. I take the 2 provinces, the 2 duchies. That puts me ahead on points, and I increase my ceiling again here with another capital. I think at this point I am threatening quadruple province now with that 2nd capital in my deck. Whether or not I can find all the cards, we'll see next turn, but I just put 4 buried treasures in play. That's 12 coin next turn, and I have 2 capitals somewhere. If I find both of them, that's already 24. That's already triple province. So I'm threatening. Let's see how my opponent responds to the threat. I could lose here. I could lose here if my opponent gets enough buys from their favors. However, I notice that they don't have favors right now, so their favors will be a bit strained, I believe. They may not be able to get all the buys necessary for a win. And I also know their ceiling. The ceiling is 30. We counted that out last turn. They might be able to win with 5 duchies and an underling. However, they don't have the buys. They don't have the buys because they had to use some of the favors of the paddock gains to draw cards, which means they couldn't use them for buys, which means we live to play another turn. I was fully prepared to lose here just because of that one turn where I didn't find a single buried treasure. However, the way it worked out is that my opponent has 5 buys and 30 coins. What is your play now in this position? Well, my opponent goes for what I think is the most reasonable thing. Full on points, triple province and duchy. And then they pass it back to me saying, this is the best I can do, and I'm praying that you can't surpass me. They go into 11 debt. It might mean that the next turn they are unable to buy anything. It's not clear to me. They didn't top deck any horses. I don't know what's in their hand. How can I win? Well, I need 21 points to win. No, 20 points to win? Yeah, I need 20 points to win. That means I need the last province. I need all of the duchies. And I need a couple of states. That is a pile of money. How much money? All of this is easy to count. 5 fours are 20, plus 8, plus 2 is 32 coin. And then you need the 7 buys. We have to draw to find everything. This put me on tilt briefly, but I had the favor stored up. If I didn't have a favor here, we would have just cried and shoot the computer. But the single favor is going to allow me to continue my turn. There was a horse down there. I knew there had to be more horses in the deck. I have more paddocks. Come on, deck. Be a little more consistent than that. And that single favor that I had stored up is going to allow me to draw and see all of the important cards. I'm just looking for the last capital at this point. The last capital effectively guarantees, without too much thinking or counting, that I have the win in hand. Get the action from this paddock so that I can continue drawing, and we get to the end of the deck, and I calculate that I do have enough favors to convert into buys, and I definitely have enough money to pile out on the provinces for a win here. This was exciting to actually use Band of Nomads. You don't get an opportunity to do that very often, and this is the first time I built a deck with Band of Nomads, Underling, and Paddock all together. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.